most defining staples of older video games is the use of startup cutscenes and opening movies. These being sequences or videos that preceded the title screen or were integrated into them in some way. Those things that clearly had a lot of effort put into them, but you eventually skipped anyway after seeing them so many times. They were traditionally the first thing a player would see after booting up their game for the very first time. These cutscenes often gave you an impression of the game's tone, gameplay, or at the very least, aimed to get you pumped for the experience you likely paid $60 for. Openings have been commonplace beyond video games too, and likely originated from other pieces of media, like movies and TV shows. If you look at the Japanese genre of anime, it's almost taboo for most mainstream shows not to feature an opening animation sequence, considering they aim to do much the same as video game openings, getting the audience pumped and giving a taste of what's to come, except likely carrying far more weight and importance. Having a catchy and memorable song and a distinct visual opening can sometimes be just as important as the content that follows it. As for video game startup cutscenes, in a similar way to many openings of TV shows or opening credits of movies, give the player a taste of what to expect in the coming hours of play, and aim to make use of the very important first impression. However, much like the launch animations of many older consoles like the PlayStation 1, Sega Genesis, or the Nintendo GameCube, these cutscenes have mostly faded into obscurity, with games gradually favoring a more direct opening, not seeking to waste any time. Today, you're more likely to be greeted by a few logos, health and safety messages, and loading icons before reaching the title screen, instead of a celebratory and gripping opening. It is important to note as well that we do see a couple of games today make great use of these startup cutscenes, even though they can be few and far between. This discussion is also not directed as a dig at any games that don't use these openings either, because plenty of titles favored a more direct approach even when this trend was particularly popular. However, the impact of this more instantaneous approach, where a game takes you straight to the menu, has lost a bit of its flair, given it's the custom of almost every video game today. Though, there are several reasons as to why these cutscenes may have somewhat faded into obscurity, and are rarely used today. An obvious reason is that this staple was so heavily played out that it essentially became a cliché, and developers often want to try new things that may work better for the experience they're trying to provide. It wouldn't be too presumptuous to assume that there'd be some dated connotations associated with this trend at some point in time. Secondly, it's not too outlandish a claim to say that a while ago, many game studios heavily prioritized showing off the new capabilities of hardware and technology. The desire to show off the most flashy, advanced experience possible in the early days of 3D graphics. The early Tekken openings are a pretty classic example of this, being extremely over the top and showing off those Lego-looking 3D models, which at the time were undoubtedly pretty impressive. These kinds of cinematic openings were particularly common in the 90s through to the mid-2000s, with a real desire to showcase pre-rendered, stunning 3D animation, which probably didn't age as well as developers may have hoped. Though, as the internet became more effective and viable as a marketing channel, it seems many publishers and developers realized that these efforts could be better directed towards reveal trailers and advertisements instead of opening cutscenes. Thirdly, a large number of AAA studios have been aiming to provide more serious and narrative-driven experiences over the past decade or so. Games like The Last of Us, 2018's God of War, or Red Dead Redemption 2, just to name a couple. Some developers may believe that featuring an opening like this could potentially provide a bit of a conflicting effect, considering the more serious tone they often look for. Though we do see a few instances of modern AAA titles like these featuring cinematic openings, like The Witcher 3 or Cyberpunk 2077. You can also take a look back at older games with a large emphasis on narrative to see some interesting approaches to this cliché, some good examples being the Metal Gear Solid series or the early Silent Hill games. However, I could see this desire to deliver more modern, narrative-driven experiences as a reason why these cutscenes have decreased a bit in popularity, as many other developers seek to follow the techniques and approaches of the industry leaders, hence bringing about a bit of a cause and effect. And finally, with attention spans generally decreasing over the past few years, it's possible some studios simply wanted to eliminate any unnecessary time between startup and immediate feedback. If a player isn't particularly interested in watching through a cutscene and just wants to start the game, regardless of how artistic the cutscene may be, some might see it as wise to eliminate this period of waiting as to not waste any time getting the player on board with the experience, opposed to trying to sell the player on a product that they've already bought. An accommodating effect of this is also the fact that a number of startup cutscenes that we do see today are pretty concise and straight to the point, further emphasizing this desire to keep the player's attention. While it's impossible to pinpoint any particular reason, I do think it's a combination of these factors that have caused this beloved and classic staple to become more of an uncommon niche than anything else. Though I do think this is kind of sad, as they do have a great functionality and can be quite impactful when done right. The Legend of Zelda has always been exceptional at setting a clear, defining tone for the game to come, by blending an opening cinematic cutscene with the title screen. Ocarina of Time gives a somber tone, Wind Waker provides a very joyful and wondrous opening, Majora's Mask starts cheery but slowly becomes more sinister as it goes on, and Twilight Princess has a very melancholic yet grand cinematic. Each of these is very distinct to the experience that's about to follow, which is part of what makes them so impactful. They feel a part of the holistic experience associated with each title. It's this reason in particular that makes me pretty disappointed in the opening for Breath of the Wild, or rather, the lack thereof. It's essentially a slideshow in the main menu with no accompanying music or anything. While Breath of the Wild is a game that makes great use of silence, there's a lot more that could have been done here. While researching this video, I found a great example of what the opening could have looked like, more akin to the rest of the series, which works exceptionally well. The link is in the description. I do think a reason this choice was made by Nintendo is thanks to the influence of industry trends and the pressure to conform to modern standards. And while Breath of the Wild did bring a lot of innovation, this is still a staple of the series that I would have liked to see maintained. Another example of a fantastic opening cutscene is actually from a very recent game, which helped kickstart this video into production, namely Devil May Cry 5. A game anticipated by fans for over 11 years, and naturally greeting said fans with a return to form with a classic startup cutscene, akin to the ones seen in the days of its predecessors on the PlayStation 2. It's subtle enough not to overwhelm newcomers, yet impactful enough to get the series veterans excited. Almost as if the game is saying, welcome back. A perfect blend of old and new, and a great example of how startup cutscenes can still work even today. It's an opening I can't bring myself to skip even after seeing it so many times, which is a testament to how effective it is. Of course, startup cutscenes can also help a game be more memorable too, and an impactful one can remain in a player's mind many years after finishing and moving on from the title. An example of this, at least in my case, would be the original Spyro the Dragon, an iconic, exuberating melody that perfectly captures the tone of the game and the character of Spyro himself. It's this nostalgia I feel that makes me pretty sad to see absolutely no presence of it in the Spyro Reignited trilogy from 2018. Again, this is likely maintaining consistency with modern standards of games today, but it's still pretty disappointing given it's one of the most memorable parts of the original trilogy. That, and possibly the best way of celebrating these old games from the PlayStation 1, would be to provide a reimagined version of such a classic staple. But the staying power of a great opening cutscene is a real thing, and can give a game a much longer presence even if that wasn't necessarily an intention by the developers. Case in point, FIFA 14. I think it's best I just show you what I mean to get my point across.
But on the horizon awaits a new season, a new opportunity for redemption, for glory, for immortality. The brave will take to the pitch as warriors to battle, shoulder to shoulder, face to face. The hunger, the determination to push limits, to fight, to run, tackle, defend, attack, score, and celebrate.
Yeah, there was a lot of mention of gravity at the 2014 Academy Awards, but no mention of this. Yeah, I think it's fair to say that the judges were bought. I don't think anybody expected me to be talking about FIFA 14 of all things, but here we are. If this opening can make someone like me get invested in football, then it's safe to say that openings can be pretty effective. I think if anything, the fact that these startup cutscenes are more obscure now is just a sign of the times. Priorities change as time goes on and developers want to try new things, which is understandable. though considering how nostalgic I get when seeing these kinds of opening cutscenes and how many I can remember, shows how impactful they really were. They're extremely effective in getting you excited for the experience you're about to have, and are great at communicating tone or even important bits of the upcoming story. And in the case of the extremely dated, tacky openings like the original Tekken games, they still have a monumental amount of charm, so I can't really bring myself to dislike them. Even if they are a staple of an older time, I do believe these startup cutscenes hold a great deal of value. I suppose I'm sad they're not as potent as they used to be, though I'm still happy they exist in some capacity.